If you declare an ounce of platinum to be worth $1 trillion, you do that and use that shell game to pay off your debts between your different government departments. You're no better than Venezuela or Zimbabwe. You're just printing it. And I think this is actually really dangerous. If they do that, if Krugman and the MNT guys convince a Democratic majority in Congress this is a good idea, if they actually do that, I think the world sees the U.S. as a banana republic. I think it could be hugely and immediately damaging to what's left of the dollar's safe haven mantra and reserve currency status. I think could much more rapidly decelerate.
This week's specials with Miles Franklin Precious Metal Investments. Type 2 American Silver Eagles for only $7.75 over spot, and 2-ounce mother and baby platypus coins from the Perth Mint for only $3.75 over spot per ounce. Call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. Hey everyone, this is Elijah K. Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and back with us today is our good friend Lobo Tiggre from the Independent Speculator. Lobo, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Elijah.
If we could get an update on what we discussed last time, you were saying how gold and silver were acting differently than they have in the past, and that silver was actually acting more as an industrial metal than a monetary metal, and this might continue to be the case for the near future. Your perspective then, and are there any updates on that?
Sure. Well, this is something that has earned me a lot of pushback from the silver community. Our good friends at Wall Street Silver, some of the folks over there on their YouTube channel have dubbed me Darth Silver because I'm obviously in league with Darth Vader if I say anything other than, yes, everything's perfect with silver. But actually, I think that's a misperception. Forgive me for digressing, but I think that's a misperception. If silver's role is changing, that doesn't necessarily mean it's changing for the worse. And if silver has, a bigger industrial component to its demand, supply and demand fundamentals, why is that necessarily bad? I mean, different isn't necessarily bad. And if we have, this massive new source of demand from the politically driven, electrification of the world, that's actually a multi-decade bullish factor for silver that gives it maybe some upside protection that gold might not enjoy as more purely a monetary metal, depending on certain circumstances going forward. So I think it's just a knee-jerk, incorrect reaction to say, oh, well, he must be anti-silver. I just came back from the Silver Summit in Idaho, and I made a joke about this and said, just because I say the data says there might be something different or changing here, that doesn't mean I'm in league with Darth Vader or Jeff Christian from the comics. And Jeff Christian was there. Fortunately, he had a good sense of humor about it, but he was in the audience when I put that up on the slide. So, look, guys, have a sense of proportion, please. And the data we're talking about is a breakdown and correlation over the last year between gold prices and silver prices. And I think most of us have seen this or sensed this in real time. You watch the gold and silver price, and it seems like more days than not lately, gold will be up, silver be down. Silver be up, gold will be down. They're just acting differently. Now, all of that having been said, I'm not saying that it is done. It's a done deal. Silver is just industrial metal and has no monetary property. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there's evidence that it's starting to change, and it kind of stands to reason. So we don't have to rehash all of that, but just takeaways are, I'm not bearish on silver. If your purpose as an investor in the space is to make money, you can't ignore the data just because it's not what you want to see. And see if I'm right about this change happening, it's one that will happen over many years. It's not a, one and done overnight kind of change. But don't ignore it. I mean, you just watch that price data and look at silver, and don't be surprised if it starts correlating more with copper than gold over the years to come.
And then as for investors and people who are looking to hold the physical metal, are you thinking that owning more gold then would be good at this point?
Yes, that's exactly the takeaway. Like in terms of my investments, my stocks and things, years to come in the future, that's not going to change, this year, what happens with my gold and silver stock. So I hadn't changed anything at all in terms of my stock selection right now. But in terms of bullion, If in the future silver doesn't go back into circulation as coinage, that makes a big difference to how much silver I need to stack. I mean, I haven't sold an ounce of my silver stash, not since my financial meltdown of 1999, and I think I can be forgiven for that. But how much physical silver do I need if in the future gold and digitally transferable gold, which is infinitely divisible, makes it unnecessary for silver to go back into circulation as coinage? And that's even if any metal goes back into circulation. You can have, quickly, easily transferable warehouse receipts systems with or without blockchain to handle the issue of making change. So without digging too deep into, monometallic, bimetallic, and trimetallic standards and all the complications, the point is that, and then this is a takeaway, like this would affect my decisions now. If I have money that I want to solidify into savings, do I want to stack more silver or more gold? And there's a case to be made of, silver still has more catching up to do, so silver has more upside. But that's an investment case. That is speculating for gains on silver. It's not savings. As a saver, socking away bullion that I have no intention of ever selling for long-term savings, it makes sense to go more towards the gold side. It's more convenient, it's smaller, it's less bulky, doesn't tarnish, don't have to take it out and polish it every once in a while, right? And longer term, if there's ever a monetary differentiation there, then I'm better off with gold. And you know what? If 20 years from now we do go back into metals in circulation, I'm completely wrong, and silver is used as coinage on a day-to-day basis, I bet I'll be able to find a money changer who will exchange my gold for silver. So it's not like I'll be stuck. But yes, takeaway decision for right now, maybe rethink what you're stacking for the long term.
It's not like there's a bad decision here. If people are looking to invest in either gold or silver, holding the physical gold or silver for savings purposes as a hard asset, I mean, you can't really go wrong with either of them. But as you mentioned, if gold is going to have a greater monetary role in the future, maybe gold would be the play right now. And now your perspective, then, it seems like people do have this sense that we need to have something of value backing our currency. That kind of brings us to this whole idea right now that's been floating around about this $1 trillion platinum coin we could use to pay off some of the debt. It's like, it's such a ridiculous idea, but at the core of it, it's like, platinum does have value. So maybe that's why people are thinking of it and thinking that it could be a possible solution. Is that feeling in our core that yes, something of value needs to back our currency.
If you think about it, the way you frame the question is perfect. I think this is really telling, because the powers that be keep telling us that gold's not money, it's a barbarous relic. Bernanke is on 60 Minutes saying, we only have gold at Fort Knox for traditional reasons. It's just tradition. There's no monetary or financial significance to it whatsoever. And yet, this as ridiculous as this idea is, why not print it on a piece of bark or a piece of toilet paper or, chewing gum wrapper? Well, the idea of minting it on platinum, even though the value of an ounce of platinum would be so insignificant compared to $1 trillion, it might as well be on a chewing gum wrapper. As ridiculous, as obviously silly as that is, they understand at some level that people in the real world understand that these metals have actual real value. And this may not be where you wanted to go with this question, but if you think about it, I think the Bitcoin crowd and the whole crypto craze has done gold and metals a huge service, not disservice, but a service, because they have educated an entire generation or two of younger people who wouldn't have listened to old boomer gold bugs about the value of gold. They've educated them about the dangers of fiat currency, or the dangers of declaring something to be worth something that actually has no value whatsoever. If you declare an ounce of platinum to be worth $1 trillion, the platinum value in there is so insignificant. It's basically the same thing. It is still fiat. It is by government fiat, by force of law, that we're saying that this thing that might be worth $1,000 is worth 1,000 times more. That's a lie. It's not worth that. And, if you do that and use that shell game to pay off your debts between your different government departments, you're no better than Venezuela or Zimbabwe. You're just printing it. And I think this is actually really dangerous. If they do that, if Krugman and the MNT guys convince a Democratic majority in Congress that this is a good idea, if they actually do that, I think the world sees the U.S. as a banana republic. I think it could be hugely and immediately damaging to what's left of the dollar's, safe haven mantra and reserve currency status. I think could much more rapidly decelerate. So maybe if you're gold bug, maybe you want them to do this. Maybe you want the fiat system to collapse sooner. But the consequences of that for real people in the real world are pretty tragic. I mean, if the system does come down as it so richly deserves, it will hurt a lot of people. So I can't really say I want that to happen, but it's serious fire they're playing with here.
That's really interesting. Yeah. If this does go through, that they create this $1 trillion coin, it kind of does expose that there's really nothing underlying our currency. We can just create whatever money we want to pay the debt. I mean, it does undermine the confidence in the dollar.
It could be the emperor has no clothes moment. It could be that moment where the child says, look, he's not wearing anything.
I guess your perspective then on when we do look at the debt ceiling situation, I know you've said that it does matter and it doesn't matter. As an investor, it's not like the debt ceiling will not be raised, right? But as a person, it does matter to us because there are consequences of just continuing to raise the debt ceiling or creating money to pay the debt.
Yeah, well, this is one of those things where fiscal conservatives, hard money advocates, we've kind of got a bit of a Chicken Little reputation on this because it's been since, the 50s, people complained about the national debt. In the 70s, people were ready to go and live in the bunker in Idaho or something because the national debt was getting out of hand. And every decade, we have some new catastrophe and the national debt takes some giant leap upwards. And people say, well, this just can't go on. This has to be disaster. And somehow, here we are, 2021, and it hasn't blown up. It hasn't fallen apart. So it's a little risky to go out there and say, oh, yeah, this is it. We're now looking at 30 trillion. That's the number. And it's all going to fall apart and come to an end. But the reality is that it does matter that, debt to GDP does have a relationship that's very dangerous. And at some point, the piper does have to be paid. So I'm not sure I'm going to help anybody make an investment decision tomorrow. I think this is the doesn't matter part. The doesn't matter part is, they're going to raise it. And, for now, the party goes on. And so I would not make a speculative or regular investment decision assuming that the debt ceiling won't be raised and there will be this big catastrophe now. So that's what I'm saying for that. As a person, though, seeing the country in greater and greater debt, I'm more and more alarmed. I don't know when it blows up. But you know what? Eventually, the Soviet Union did collapse. Right? Okay, it took 70 years, and we don't want to wait 70 years. But if we start the ticker at 1971, when the dollar was separated from the last remnants of a gold standard, we're actually 50 odd years, or just about 50 years right now into that cycle, and things accelerate. Who knows? That doesn't have to be 70 years is what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that economic stupidity eventually has consequences. Reality does matter. Excessive debt does matter. I don't know when that blows up, but I sure know that I don't want to be on the wrong side of it when it does.
Now, with respect to the risks that we see in our financial system, I mean, the U.S. debt is one of them. You've also talked about many geopolitical risks we have right now, and this whole channel, being aware and prepared. Your perspective on what we really need to be aware of right now?
I may be a bit at odds with some of my mentors and experienced people in the field. I'm actually very risk averse on political risk. I am the independent speculator, but that means rational, disciplined, independent from bias speculator. It doesn't mean the wild-eyed gambler speculator. And I take political risk very seriously. So, for example, Peru just elected a very hardcore leftist president who hasn't done anything yet particular to the mining industry other than talk. But he's talking about pretty serious, tax increases. They've said they walked back threats of nationalization, but those have come up again. It's pretty scary. And the thing is that if something really bad does happen there, it's really bad and it's instant. And a day late is way too late. the stocks just fall off a cliff when something like that happens. So I'm as out of Peru as can be at the moment, just as an example. And it's a shame because there are several countries in Africa, particularly West Africa, where they're actually quite friendly to gold mining. The permitting and getting a mine built, it's faster, it's easier. They want to see these projects developed. So in some ways, the politics is very welcoming there. But you never know when there could be another coup, another coup in some of these countries. Or you read stories about a convoy of armored cars from the gold mine being attacked with, ambushed like in the movies with guns and stuff, and people die. It's as bad as some of my Canadian friends can be after a few many Molson Goldens. You really don't hear about miners being ambushed on their way home from the lake at, the Red Lake mine or something like that. So I do think that there really is there is a reason why people pay a premium for projects and companies' stocks in North America or the safer jurisdictions. And you know what? In a great bull market, all of these will go up. But I just sleep better at night without having the risk of waking up in the morning and discovering that the CEO of my gold company was shot somewhere in West Africa and the stock has fallen off a cliff or there's another coup. Just who needs that? It's hard enough to get these things right without that kind of outsized risk. So I do encourage people to be cautious. And if you do go there, if you find some awesome contrarian play that's selling for pennies on the dollar in Peru or Africa or some other place, make sure that it really is selling for pennies for a dollar. If you get something so dirt cheap that at some point, this is a Doug Casey lesson, at some point, price trumps risk. But it has to be a deep discount. To take me into AK-47 land or, Nationalization Central, then I want pennies on the dollar, not quarters on the dollar or dimes on the dollar, maybe nickels on the dollar. But pennies on the dollar would tempt me more.
Now, with respect to investing in mining stocks, coming full circle here as we see the change in the environment of the gold and silver markets, with respect to how silver is now not really seen as a monetary metal, how does that impact, if at all, investing in gold versus silver mining stocks?
I don't think there's any difference there at all. I mean, most governments, at least they won't admit that they think of gold as money. It's funny, the $1 trillion platinum coin thing kind of exposes that they do still understand that. And you think about Basel III, that counts gold as a tier 1 banking asset. And if you travel, you cross the border and the form asks you, do you have more than $10,000? This is an OECD thing. And that's why so many countries ask the same question. If you wonder, why do they always ask the same question? Well, it's because it's an OECD standard and everybody copies that. And it'll ask you, do you have $10,000? And it used to just be, in cash, checks, currency. Now it says cash, checks, currency, or gold. So they tell you that gold is not money. But, when you're crossing the border, if you've got gold, they treat it like money. So it is interesting. But at the end of the day, I think the powers that be do at least want to see these things as just commodities. And in terms of political risk, nationalization, I don't think they're going to care about the changing roles of gold and silver. But if there's a gold or silver mine there and it's a cash cow, and you're in some third world country where the government wants to have more money to hand out free stuff to voters, you're at risk. But it also doesn't matter if it's copper and copper prices are up, or even, look at Mexico now with the talk about nationalizing lithium resources. And by the way, real quick, they have not talked about nationalizing existing companies. Leftist president that he is, he's talking about nationalizing the industry, but that existing concessions will be respected. I think that's important for people who are invested in other Mexico plays. But just this idea, right? It's not gold, it's not even copper, and lithium isn't even rare, but lithium is the new oil. So just on that idea, we're going to nationalize it like Pemex, because Pemex is such a brilliantly well-run company, right? That's such a great idea. But that's how these people think. It's what's hot? Where can we grab some more cash? So I don't think there's any defense or differentiation there at all.
All right. Well, Lobo Tiggre, really appreciate your time today. Before we let you go, did you want to share with the viewers any last thoughts you had and where people can find you online?
Yeah, I do want to add one more thing about the markets going forward. We have tax loss season. It's a bit early right now. Here we are, early October, but it's coming. I mean, we're in the last quarter of the year, and at some point, people will be looking at their portfolios. I will be, and I think that the bearish sentiment particularly in gold and silver, is so strong that even though you could have stocks that are just down somewhat, or they're off their highs, but they're not like in the rubbish bin. Even those stocks could see massive tax loss selling as people throw in the towel, as that negative, bearish sentiment takes hold. So that, I think, would be a terrific opportunity. I'm not telling anybody to sell because the tax loss bear is coming. I'm telling people, especially those of us who have held a fair amount of cash, and I write about this at independentspeculator.com, got to get that plug in there. I write about this in my free weekly digest, no spam. How I've been holding more cash, looking for fluctuations, in particular if the taper talk sets off a Wall Street meltdown. I'm not sure that'll happen, but I am sitting in a fair amount of cash. And it was actually a reader that brought this to my attention just this morning. You know what? We've got this cash that you've been talking about, and tax loss season is coming. I think that could be a source of terrific opportunities, and it's certainly something that I will be writing about as I offer guidance to clients going forward.
Fantastic. Well, it's independentspeculator.com. Lobo, thank you once again for joining us today, and God bless.
Thank you, Elijah.
This is Dunnigan Kaiser, founder of Liberty and Finance. I'm now a licensed gold and silver broker for Miles Franklin. Call me directly for the physical gold and silver that you need at the best price with personalized private service from one of the oldest and best companies in the business. 31 years strong, A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau, 0 complaints, licensed and bonded for physical delivery, vault storage, or precious metals IRAs. Excellent prices, privacy, and confidentiality. Pay by check, money order, ACH, bank wire, or Bitcoin. Satisfaction guaranteed. For fastest service, just call 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 888-81-LIBERTY. And either I or one of my sons and fellow brokers will call you back as soon as we can and understand your needs.